Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to some, good day to others. We want to welcome you to SKTV. Welcome to the show. We want to welcome each and every one of you to today's edition. Welcome to this interview or this conversation with Mr. Darlington S. Collins, um, who will be our guest here for today. We're playing host to Mr. Collins to discuss different national issues, but most importantly, we are here to ensure that we speak about the progressive. Considering today, April 14th, is a historic day in Liberia and also in the movement of the progressives and other people in Liberia. So we're going to be having these conversations with Mr. Collins here. We want you to share the show, invite others so that we can get this conversation started. We want to have this conversation started or this interview started as soon as possible. But today we want to welcome all of you. We want to reference the Liberian people as the most important people on earth, as we always do. We want to reference the Liberian women as the most beautiful women on earth, as we always also do. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. Let's share the show. Momentarily, we'll be bringing in our guests. The guest is seated in the back, ready to go. So we don't have to wait for the guests. Just before we bring our guests in or on today, some quick housekeeping. Quick housekeeping we want to get through here with. We want to ensure that our guest is respected as always. You can respectfully disagree with our guests. You can state your disagreement, but please let's make our guests feel comfortable. Let's respect our guests. And let's make our guests feel welcome. Quickly, in other news, before we get to the musical break here and share the show, former Vice President Joseph Yuma Boakai had a press conference this morning for about anywhere between 3 to maybe 5 or 7 minutes. Took no questions, stated opposition or reiterated opposition, which I found very interesting and very strange. But, well, they got to do what they got to do, right? In other news, very interestingly and funnily, or very funny, let me put it that way, our President George Weah, the Invisible Park, I'm not sure whatever the name is, structure looks decent. Structure does look decent. I think should be opening the park anytime soon. And he has a couple of celebrities that have flown in. Soccer stars. I think I've seen Adebayo. I've seen the picture of Diouf from Senegal, Asamoah Gyan from Ghana, I'm not sure who else I'm missing, but I think there are a couple of other people there. So that, I think, is the newest news in town, which I find interesting again. Very, very interesting and funny. But we wanted to make sure we bring you other news. Amidst everything that's going on, the Invisible Park. Very interesting. Very, very interesting things are happening. But we'll give you one or two announcements after the interview here with our guests. We look forward to learning about the progressives, hearing about the progressives. For some of you, it might be maybe the first time you've heard about the progressives, or you would be learning about them. However, today that's the conversation we would be in with Mr. Darlington Collins here on SKTV. I look forward to the conversation as well. I do. I'm very excited, intrigued, and ready to listen to the conversation about the progressive. At some point, I know Telvi is not available today. If she has time, she could pop on. But at some point, Sekou also could pop on. But in the interim, we will be carrying on this interview with Mr. Collins. Share the show. Please help us share the show. Invite other people as we get started here. Please invite others. Come here about the progressive. Let's talk about the progressive. Let's talk about how everything started and so forth. But invite other people. Please invite others as we get to our musical break here really quick. Share the show, and let's get started. They lied to us. I love this song because it's applicable to most politician and almost every politician in Liberia. We will no copyright to this song. Let's share the show, guys.
My people, where you at? Where you at? Wake up from your slumber, stop sleeping. Whip your hands, whip your hands, whip your hands, whip your. Come on, come on, come on. I know you're sleeping now. You gotta whip us some more, yeah? Okay, let's go. The people fool us. The people lie to us. The government betray us. They betray us so much. I said they lie. The people fool us, so the people lie to us. The government betray us. They can lie, they can steal, they go knock the ball. I said we tired with their lies. We tired with their promises that led us to all our damages. We tired with that speech they preach indeed, and now unique they deceive us. The thing we saw, it frustrate us. So why did you lie? Why did you steal? Why did you allow the citizens to be? You see, we just tell you that why we voted you. But you fool us, you screw us, you use us a little and abuse us. So why? The government should lie. Why? But that's the question that we ask. They lie. The people fool us. The people lie to us. The government betray us. They betray us so much. I said they lie. The people fool us, so the people lie to us. The government betray us. They can lie, they can steal, they go knock the ball. No one to trust. My people, no one to hope on. Nobody. My hope that I have been broken. I'm telling you, brother. So where are the schools? Where are the roads? Where are the jobs that they say they could afford? But they're too selfish. The people tired with their rhetoric. People tired, they tired. You see the reason why we ask why the government betray. They have enough of time, but yeah, then instead they delay. People suffer. No war for people crying for hunger. Look at. Your vision and your mission, your intention to the nation is poor. You got nothing to show. Nothing. So, why? The government should lie. Why? But that's the question that we ask. They lie. The people fool us. The people lie to us. The government betray us. So they lie. The people fool us. The people lie to us. The government betray us. They can lie, they can steal, they go knock the corrupt. With the promises that left us to allow our damages. We tired with that speech they preach indeed, and now unique they deceive us. The thing we saw it frustrate us. So why can you lie? Why can you steal? Why can you allow the citizens to breathe? You see, we just tell you that why we vote tell you. But you fool us. You screw us, you use us and little on abuse us. So why? The government should lie. Why? But that's the question that we ask. The people fool us. The people lie to us. The government betray us. So I said they lie.
They can lie, they can steal, they corrupt. A God. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, you're watching SKTV. Regardless of where you're following us from, we want to welcome each and every one of you to SKTV today. Today is Thursday, April 14th, 2022. About a couple of decades ago, maybe 50, 40, 60 decades ago, we had something or some group, some people come up in Liberia, in our country. Today, we are here talking about them. We'll waste no time but to bring in our guests here really, really quick so that we can get started with this conversation, with this interview, and move on. Help us to share the show, invite others, as we promise that we'll have an interesting time here today. Good afternoon, good morning, Mr. Darlington Collins, and welcome to SKTV.
Well, Steve, good afternoon to you and your many audience. It is indeed a privilege and opportunity for me to share your well-respected platform, to sit here, and talk about the political realities of our country in April 14. So it is indeed an honor. I hope to learn from your audience, to learn too from you as we share the little we know about, our participation and our involvement into this space called Liberia.
Thank you. Well, I think it's your first time on SKTV or your debut or so forth.
Yes.
So
I'm making my first appearance here, and I'm so excited. Every time we try to plan and come on here, we just never had time. But it's okay now that we're here.
Great. Now that you weren't here, but you are here, it is good that we get started with the conversation. What do you make of the song that was just playing? They lie to us, the government's corrupt, they fool us, whatever you want to term it as. What do you make of it in terms of whether it's the progressive or the current reality we are faced with? What do you make of it?
Well, you see, musicians, if you may, they are social activists that play a very significant and meaningful role in the liberation of the African continent. You know, when I hear Takunje say they lied to us, I am reminded by, the South African, trumpist, who just died a couple years ago, Hugh Masekela. These were musicians who didn't just use music, for people to amuse people in the nightclub or entertainment places, but they used the lyrics of their song to foster the revolution, to speak against ills in the society. So it is not it's not so unique, to us who are political people, if you may. We have been following you. You listen to Hugh Masekela, you listen to Miriam Makeba, who wrote a nice song, when the Portuguese were crushed from invading Guinea, praising Ahmed Sekou Touré in her song. A lot of social political activists, in Liberia. You want to talk about, Miata Fambule, who have always been in the trenches, of advocacy, and one of her songs, The Corruption. When Brother Takunje made a song, it was under the Unity Party regime. And you see now, the masses are always moving forward in history. Even when you think you want to jitter or flip-flop, no matter your role or your historical obligation, the people hold you to account. And it was so funny. I remember, the inception of the WIA administration, Brother Jeniton Kofa, Atlas Takunje, was supporting the CDC. And, and then he said, he was campaigning anti-protest, while people who wanted to hold government to account, was using his song, reminding him of historical obligation. Yet in America, the likes of Sam Cooke, using music to liberate the minds of the people. So yes, we are very much aware of social activists and how they use music to speak to the social fabric of the society. We follow music too. If you don't let us go into the history.
Well, most definitely, music has been used in different contexts, but I totally agree with you that music has also been used in the political arena as to send messages, to motivate people, to inspire them, to encourage people, to also, point out the wrongs, the rights of leaders as well. So music is part of our fabric. It's part of the world we live in, very important. Thank you for that point. You mentioned Meata Famule. I'm not sure if you've been following most recently, and I just wanted for the record's sake to clarify this. Was this the same Meata Famule that was just at the burial of Dr. Sawyer, and I had a brief moment with the press accusing, was it the same Meata?
Yes, she's famously called him a rover anti Miata, tough talking Miata Fambula. That's all.
Okay, so
Yes.
Okay, great. We're getting to Miata Formula and put in context to the whole progressive movement, but we want to move forward to understand today's historical. But before we get into the historicity of today, many young people wouldn't understand, wouldn't know what progressive is, or who the progressives are, or what that means. We've heard these words before. Who are the progressive? What does that mean? What does progressive mean? Well, how did it come about?
Well, the progressive movement in the history of our country goes back, to the late 1960s, with the involvement in the organization of the Movement of Justice and Peace in Africa, MOJA, and subsequently in 1970 with the organization of the Progressive Alliance of Liberia, PAR. In simple, or for a better understanding, progressive means we move from one state of backwardness to a state of progress. So just from the generic definition of progressive, to make progress, so the progressive, yes, have played a very meaningful role. As you may be aware of the history, I mean, many young people might have heard distorted information of history about the progressive movement of our country. But these were young men, probably in their prime, around my age, when they took up the singular cause to challenge and confront the backwardness and the injustices in our country. So yes, we are ardent followers and students of history, as we receive the progressive, teachings and ideas, and we see where some of the things they fought for. It's sad that the context of Liberia today, when people talk about, liberation struggle in Africa, and you find Liberians will be inspired by listening to, professors from Kenya. People now, most of the young people in the intelligentsia class, they're talking about listening to Professor, Pro Lumumba, from Kenya. You want to go to Ghana, Professor Woso Yinka, people talking about, you go to Nigeria, Professor Awolowo, you go to Sierra Leone, people talking about old man Shaka Stevens. But the unfortunate thing about it is that in our country, people do not reference or ascribe to decent men who have struggled for this political space called Liberia. Now I see all of us, we on social media, we can criticize our government, we can argue, we can debate, we can hold government to account, we can organize, even when the regime, is allergic to protests, we can organize. Before the formation of this country called Liberia, those were not things that, were practiced so easily. For Steve Bole, who's your father, for you to be on Sky, to criticize or critique government. So these were some of the vices the progressive movement fought for, to undo that backward state, of national politics. A lot of people don't know, when they talk about the legislature, the bicameral form of governance we have in our country, where we are stratified into 3 separate branches of government, but yet coordinate. People will always say, oh, back in the days, these lawmakers were more organized from what we are having. It is an evolution of the democracy, if you may. We can title this period in our history, the evolution of the Liberian democracy. Because from the formulation of your country from 1847 up to 1980, Steve, the people of Cape Mount could not decide who will go as representative or senator. The people of Grand Cru, even the people of Bapolu. What happened? You see power only concentrated among the very few, if you made the elite. They stay up Asmond Street and they will decide, Steve, for example, you will go and be superintendent in Cape Mount. And Brother Darlington Collins, you will represent the people of Grand Cru without the equal participation of the people and opening up the democratic space. So yes, the progressive movement, sought to end that culture or that period of, backwardness and fight for multi-party democracy in the country.
Okay, so considering you spoke about a progressive being aligned or being spread all over Africa, is the progressive, can we turn the progressive also as Pan-Africanism or so forth? What would you say in that context? Or is it exclusive?
They were. And the progressive, if you may, they are Pan-Africanists. They are young men who follow the ideas of most of the liberation, fighters on the continent of Africa. The reason why I mentioned vis-a-vis the progressive movement with that of the continent of Africa is because Liberians, we are too quick to, to acknowledge other, Pan-Africanists and other people who fought for freedom all over Africa. In Ghana, people talk about Nkrumah. In Tanzania, they talk about Julius Nyerere. In Mozambique, they talk about Samoa Moses Machel. So all over Africa, there were liberation leaders evolving, all throughout the continent. And the contradiction in the Liberian society was you have Mr. Totman, who has been president for more than 20 plus years. So that was the barrier that the progressive movement shook pillows and demanded answer in the name of justice. So that is why you found out now that we can sit now and chit-chat about, participation. The people of Cape Mount can have whoever they want to elect. Even the democratic process will not be perfect or better, as we all opt that it should be. But democracy in its true tenets is the people equal participation and deciding on who their leaders should be. Not for a particular group of kleptocrats to decide who will represent the people. So yes, the reason why I mentioned that, because a lot of time, how many Liberians you see where credit, when they talk about the struggle of our country, we mention Edward Wedmond Blyden, Albert Port. We talk about even, Professor Alaric Togba. We talk about, God bless his soul, Dr. Sawyer, Dr. Tipote. But in your country, the irony about these things is that when you are very honest and you go into public service, the Liberian people will even make fun of you. They tell you want to be poor like Tipote. But all of these people that I just mentioned, they have been disciplined public servants who are entered government, not feasting off the resources of the people, but they were honest. But the Liberian society, unfortunately, do not appreciate their years of struggle.
So I'd like to bring this conversation of the progressive back to Liberia to keep it in context here. Can the progressive, in terms of keeping in the context of Liberia, can a progressive be as scrap as native people versus Congo?
No. You see. Let me borrow the logic of Madiba, Nelson Mandela. Madiba, on the famous trial, he said, in my lifetime, I have fought against white domination and against black domination. He proposed the fighting of an egalitarian society where everybody, regardless of where you come from, must be respected. So the progressive is now basically, as people may want to put the divide, the native and conquer politics. But yes, if you may, who introduced the culture of segregation in our country? I mean, unfortunately, I would not want to use the word the Americo-Liberians, but we must talk about it was the settlers. These were the very few powerful people with education who came from slavery from America, and they believed that they could run a democratic space by micromanaging the space. And you could see back in the day, before people even had a mission letter to the University of Liberia, they need to know who your father will be or which family lineage you come from. So these were social injustices in the country where, quote unquote, the indigenous people were kept absolutely far away from the politics. They weren't given an opportunity to critique and hold their government to account. So yes, I mean, it's sad that, the ethnic divide happened in our politics, but even our port is from Americo-Liberia hegemony, a very, veteran Liberian pamphlet and poet. God bless us. So it was our port who was reminding the regime of Mr. Totman and Torbot that these are young people that you must work with. Understand that they are educated. A lot of people talk about, when they mention Bacchus Matthews, they want to see him as this progressive icon who have evolved. Bacchus used to be a cadet at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dr. Tipote was a classroom teacher at the University of Liberia. Dr. Sawyer, Dr. Fumbule. These were young people who were educated in their prime. They were already at the classroom level contributing their quota. So, unfortunately, the progressives, if you may, yeah, but yes, they are predominantly indigenous people. It is not that, and again, and I want to conclude on this note, as equally as you have backward, quote-unquote, Congo people, they are still backward indigenous people. Some of them, you see them in the legislature. They are even far more corrupt than the likes of Richard Henrys and some of the men who were executed on firing squad.
Okay,
I mean, the story doesn't stop there.
That being said, every time this conversation of the progressive comes up, whether in public or in private, normally the picture that's printed by most people is a bunch of older men or older women. You being a young man, how did you find yourself in this whole progressive thing, and how far are you into it, and what's going on? And hold on one second, please, before you answer that question. As opposed to the public seeing you aligned with COP or COP people, COP members, the like of Costa, who are quote unquote known to the public as crooks, blackmailer, and criminal who makes deals with people. It's not him. It's a public record. His own record of making deals with the Ellen government and other people most recently. So how did you find yourself into this? Being a progressive, what is the contract here?
You're asking two questions. You want me to talk about my alignment with Mr. Henry Costa, or you want me to talk about how did I find myself in the progressive quadrant? I can deal with that separately.
I want the question is geared towards you are progressive, and according to you, the progressive stand for one thing. Yet you seem to be aligned with people who are not of the progressive, who are carrying on funny shenanigans. How does that happen? Where's the contract here?
You see, Steve, you are coming up with these things, and I must say this today, and for the very first time publicly on record. And a lot of people, may not have the opportunity to hear this, but I would say on your platform, I became a friend to Mr. Henry Costa, in 2014, the earliest of 2014. And our friendship was on a very rocket path. It was not on the smooth ride or the roller coaster ride that you see in pictures. Mr. Henry Costa, as anybody else, is entitled to his own political persuasion. He's entitled to equal participation and hold government to account. It is his business. In 2014, Mr. Costa took, a position when he used to be on Asmond Street on the Costa show. Costa started to criticize the progressive struggle. And we learn, we agree to disagree. And Mr. Costa was one of our strongest critics of the progressive movement. But later, Mr. Costa realized that the very democratic space that he enjoys with the Costa show, where he can wear you read the Americans report, where the government of Liberia can go after his radio station and shut it down. These were the same vices that the progressive movement confronted. The only stronger thing Mr. Costa have said to me, he said, "Boy, the progressive, these guys who have taken power." But I tried to explain to him the political dynamics at the time. So now Mr. Costa respects the leaders of the progressive tendency. He's a very good friend to Che Guevara, Professor Alaric Togba. We may disagree, but again, the question of Henry Costa, nature does not create a vacuum. Steve, not so long ago, you weren't as vocal on social media as you were. Before you, Steve, there were men who was on this blue app. If you don't know, let me remind you, the likes of Brother Patrick Horner, they used to be on the famous Bumper Show. These were people that the Liberian people were attuned in listening to. Now that I see what you are doing here on Sky TV, Brother Sekou Khan and you, Brother and the Sister Tell, it is the fruit of the progressive struggle. So I'm saying that in context to Costa is that if nobody stand up to question the injustices and imbalances of the system, there will be new leaders of the struggle will emerge. So yes, I hear all these things about Mr. Costa. I find most of them to be unfounded. People say cutting deals here, there, and a lot of adjectives have been ascribed to him. I have not come on your platform to discuss Mr. Costa. He speaks for himself. But people have called Costa blackmailer. From the very definition, generically defining blackmail. I have something on you. I'm demanding this from you. You give me this in exchange to buy my silence. But how many of Mr. Costa's critics have been compiling legally? There must be the preponderance of the evidence. If you want to indict somebody and you just label Brother Costa a criminal, I think it's unfair to the brethren. If these people, if they have information cogent to Mr. Costa, it is imperative that they release it to the public. Let people hear, not to go and orchestrate lies to present him so, mischievous before the masses. No, I do not always agree with Mr. Costa. You can bear me witness. The very first protest of June 7th, I think June 7th, I supported it. I was in New York. My big sister and Sister Letty is here watching. You see, all of us who are the who are the Liberian Mission. The second protest of January 16, when Mr. Costa and the COP had called the protest, I never saw the timeliness. I disagree. I've been on record, but a lot of time people will only see when I appreciate Mr. Costa for what he do for the Liberian people. They say I am his friend. Yes, Mr. Costa is my friend. I think he's very positive, and I think his struggle must be respected. We may disagree, but we must respect people who have been consistently engaged. Check the facts. The very same people now he worked for, and he and I, we crack this joke here and there. The Unity Party people. When we were student leaders in Monrovia at the time, some of them were never our friends. We were friends to the brothers in the CDC because the struggle at the time compelled us to confront the Unity Party. Now you have Mr. Wiana who have come to power. He is very corrupt like a kitty cat. It is our historical obligation to align with forces to confront him. Mr. Costa, if you like him or hate him, this man has rallied huge scores of support with the broad-based masses of the people. So I think we need to move forward. How am I closely connected to the progressive movement? The progressive movement is very much aligned to the Student Unification Party. If you know the very history, SUP has played a very significant role, and I come from the origin or the traditional alliance with the Vanguard Party. So yes, the progressive movement, I've always set up red bases with the student movement, whether it was with the Liberian National Student Union. So some of us were fortunate as young men, to read their history, to appreciate the little they do. We don't go for quote unquote flamboyant leaders or leaders with a larger, cash value on the size of his pocket. We follow ideas. So that is why we chose to follow the progressive. Besides, I come from Newtown, My mother is watching. She just reminded me. I come from Newtown. A lot of people don't know. They just see me here, went to St. High School. We know the struggles of our people. When we talk about, pregnant women going to hospital, infant mortality rate, these were things that we experienced firsthand. My mother would tell you, I was never born in a hospital. Access to healthcare delivery, it is still a challenge for our people. And that is why we want to change. And that is the kind of society we want to build, where we can have dignity for pregnant women. That just look at the maternal mortality rate in Africa. Liberia, one of the highest. When young men pregnant sisters in Monrovia, it is compelling, as if it is a death sentence.
So let's
women go and give birth. They cannot, have access to health care.
So let's bring the progressive back in terms of we'll get back to your you being part of the progressive, and as a young man, again, like I said earlier, most of the time when the progressive are referenced, it's in terms of either older people see the progressives as older people and so forth. But here is something that I want to. Why is April 14 so famously known or attached to the progressive? Why is that so?
You see, April 14, 1979, today makes it 43 years after the progressive movement have called a peaceful assembly of the rally of the masses of the people to confront tyranny, to confront injustices in the country. The reason why April 14, 1979, it has been widely publicized, it is not because the progressive go ahead ascribing titles or to take glories to themselves for what they did for multi-party. It is because the remnants of the Chewing Party always use the April 12, 1980, and they talk about the execution of the 13 men on the firing squad and how the country was okay until the progressive came to the country and brought trouble. That is an irony and a contradiction and a falsification of history. Liberia was not okay as being espoused by the Chewing Party, that everything was okay, that they were building roads, that the economy was doing well. Go for our development. You hear these places, smell notice. Look at the objective condition of your people. Your country was just used as an extraction hub for parts of Europe and America. Your rubber today, Firestone, still feast on the latest from the Liberian masses. These are things that are still happening. These were some of the contradictions in the society. Some people say, oh yeah, April 14, yes. The reason why we pride ourselves in April 14, 1979 is to use this as an opportunity to pay tribute to the Mataya comrades who came out to rally the masses of the people. April 14, 1979. Where were the people gathered? They were gathered at the headquarters of power. The regime of Mr. Tobo panicked that if people get in the street to protest, the protesters never had arms. They were not violent. Go back. Some of our aunties, in age, they would tell you. It was the regime of the Chewing Party who answered with violence. That was April 14, 1979. That changed the political discourse in our country for the better. That sought to bring in an end against tyranny and against the Chewing Party. The regime of Mr. Tobo had instructed the army and the police to brutalize the people's children, shooting over 250 comrades, students predominantly, brutalizing them. Fast forward to April 12, 1980, the very army you call in the streets of Monrovia to teach these poor people's children a lesson. And we still see the repeat of history. We still see the repeat of history. I think it was Winston Churchill. He who failed to read history will repeat the mistakes of history. So we see every time come out to protest, the regime will try to suppress them and ask the army and the police to come in the street and brutalize people. April 14, 1979, the Tobo regime did that. So yes, we use that day to pay tribute to the legs of the comrades who down in the streets of Monrovia.
So Mr. Collins, I mean, I'm a little confused here, considering one day we would say, you know, university students or students, you know, the university is apolitical, but it seems as though the progressive tried to use the university students or students at large to push their agenda. Do you think that was fair?
But then, Steve, then you want me to question your understanding of Pan-African history. The student movement, if you always hear that the university is the macrocosm of the larger society, it is where young comrades meet and cross-pollinate ideas. It is where they exchange intellectual opinion and ideas. The university, if you may, is the melting point. You have students that come from these poor community, impoverished community. It is even disrespectful to say the progressive movement used the students. Look all over Africa. In Guinea, who led the liberation of Guinea and beat back the Portuguese? It was a student movement. In South Africa, you always talk about the South African struggle. Militants fighting against apartheid. It was student militants who were the help of Steve Biko. So the student movement have always played a meaningful role in history. So the progressive movement, all the progressive did was to explain to these students about the injustices and the backwardness in society.
So then you are ascribing to this idea now that militants could only be restricted to students.
Say that again?
Militants could only be restricted to students.
Not necessarily. Even
then,
citizen army can be a militant army.
So then the question becomes, if you would make the university campus or university students, you would politicize it. That creates problem for them as well.
Steve, you cannot uproot politics from university campuses. When you have the opportunity to dispense the national budget, the end user of the budget are the very student masses who come from Newtown, Claratown. They know when their mothers go to hospital in Senja district, in Bomi County, they know that their mother will not have access to health care. So you cannot keep it in a side. No. These are students who are the very end users of the system. They were born in poverty, they come to university, and that is the contradiction of many African leaders. When you distribute massive corruption, you loot the country coffers, but at the university, you are teaching classics. At the university, you are teaching political science. At the university, you are teaching economics, public administration. These students are reading the question of accountability. So if you may, all over Africa, man, even here in America, when there are issues, you see university students, they will come out. They're the very first people to protest. The student movement have always been the fulcrum of the society against injustices. So Liberia is not unique. It is not that, it is just unique to Liberia. In Ghana, the student movement. I mean, in Tanzania, it was a student movement. In Angola, with Dr. Agostino Neto, it was a student movement. So all over, the student movement have always played a meaningful role. So the University of Liberia campus is in no, it cannot be an extension, of political issues. Again, the university is the macrocosm of the larger society. I think you heard that multiple times.
Okay, great. So we'll move a little forward in this conversation, because then we'd like to know, up until today, 2022, did the progressive achieve their goal? If yes, where are the progressive now?
Yes, Steve, the progressive achieved their goal. From the beginning of this show, I recounted their years of struggle and achievement in fighting for multi-party democracy. The progressive wanted a free and democratic space. And it is sad that agents provocateurs will parade with this narrative that everything, in the country was okay until the progressive king and changed things around. That Liberia was doing well, just there, here, and there. Except you are telling me that you enjoy still living in Newtown. Some of these native Batustan's, you go there, you will not even believe that human beings live there. Go to Claratown. Mosquitoes dwell with the masses of our people. So are the people not so good to live in better housing facilities? Can our people now have access to improve healthcare delivery system, quality education? The people say D12 was rich. Look at the only place they have in Newtown, the D12 Memorial High School, where the sea erosion is fast moving. So yes, the progressive have accomplished a whole lot. Multi-party democracy, the very in contemporary politics now. I just mentioned, Steve, that it was nowhere possible that a Steve Boley would be on Facebook Live and question Mr. Talbot. He wants to know first who's your father. So the progressive have managed to change that culture, that young people can have ideas in their head and challenge the status quo. Again, yes, Liberia was no exception because all over Africa, these were things that were happening. So the progressive have achieved that struggle. Where the progressive are today, the progressive struggle was not for them to install themselves as national leaders. And that is why people don't understand most of the time. They say, oh, the progressive failed. You hear these weak arguments that the progressive struggle failed. No. The progressive fought not to make Dr. Tipota president of the country of Liberia. The progressive struggle was not to ensure that Alaric Togba was vice president of this country. Neither Dr. H. Burma Formula to be president, nor Soil. The progressive struggle was the undoing of the oligarchy, the old system, 1847 up to 1980. Steve, that's over 100 years. Why power should just concentrate among the minority, leaving out the people in the rural areas? The progressive fought to change that. So that is the fruit of their struggle. And I see a lot of young people here interested. Now we have time to listen to political issues. Now, many young people have evolved. They want to go into their local constituency. Some of them say to me, brother, I'll be contesting in my county, in my district. That was not possible prior to 1980. It wasn't. So that is the fruit of the progressive struggle.
Okay, now that you've brought this issue of the progressive not getting into power or not seeking power, but rather whether decentralizing power or making power accessible.
Equal participation of the people.
Equal participation of the people and so forth. Well, then the question now would be, didn't members of the progressive run for office?
Oh, yes.
Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Because according to you, the progressive were fighting to give equal power to the people, not necessarily themselves. So were the progressive contradicting themselves in this context?
But I mean, you probably progressive never contradicted themselves. When you challenge a status quo, it is you are obliged to history to provide an alternative. If I am telling you, Steve Bowler, for example, that black shirt is not nice on you, go and get you a white shirt. I must provide you an alternative options. The reason why the progressive being the architect of the idea is to say to the people, hey, this is not what a democratic and a free space should be. We can promise you something better than what it is. I mean, weren't you aware that Dr. Sawyer put forth for the mayor election that was canceled? Dr. Sawyer wanted to contest a mayor of the city of Monrovia. In the Constitution of the Republic of Liberia, we should be electing mayors. The progressive was not just about going for the presidency. No, it was about providing better options for the people. So yes, again, that is in no way contradicting.
But what you stated earlier was
you want the progressive to undo the Chewing Party and stand aside and say we don't want power.
No, the opportunity was afforded you to let us know, to let the public know what the goal and the mission of the progressive.
Right.
If they achieved that goal or that mission, you say it was achieved. You did tell us that the progressive's mission was to ensure that power was, equally distributed to the people, not necessarily progressives.
Yes.
Now I'm asking you, did the progressive contradict themselves because they themselves inserted themselves and started to run for office, even as of today? Coming we say, who's considered a progressive is in power. Is that a contradiction?
No, but Steve, you cannot deny one right to political participation. It is guaranteed for by the Constitution of the Republic. Even a lot of time, people have criticized clergymen who want to be president. A lot of clergymen have popped up, in recent time, they want to be president. You cannot deny one's ability to participate. Again, when somebody criticizes a particular thing, it is also better for them to provide alternative options. Do we still believe that Dr. Tipote, when you with Labrimpo made him president, could he have been a better president than Charles Taylor? Yes. If you could have given when Dr. Formula contested for president in 1985, possibly, could the country have been better than what we are seeing? Rampant corruption, injustices in the country. These were some of the things that we wanted to address. So the progressive was not to just clinch on power to install themselves. We are not military people. you saw Sergeant Doe. It was the military who took over. I mean, after the coup, it was not the progressive who took power, who stormed the executive mansion and took power. The first, even when Sergeant Doe took power, the Student Unification Party was the very first student organization that mandated and called on President Samuel Doe to return the country to civilian rule. So yes, you cannot deny Brother Komine Wisa his participation from representing the people of River G County.
Great. So then I want
even you, Steve. So because you on this microphone one day and we say you're broadcast, a political commentator or a journalist, for example, tentatively, can we deny you an opportunity of serving your people when the time is right?
No, not necessarily. But
that would be unfair now.
Right. Again, I was going by what you said earlier. So you are readjusting your statement to say not only that, from what I'm hearing now, you're readjusting your statement to say not only that the progressive were only trying to have power given to the people, but they themselves also wanted to help shift this paradigm. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's what I said. When you criticize, you don't just criticize, you provide alternative options for the people. You talk about Nelson Mandela in South Africa. They criticize the white supremacy rule. Mandela, they subjected themselves to the party of the ANC. Nkrumah, the Conventions People Party in Ghana. These were activists who wanted to change the status quo. They subjected themselves to election. It is the people's ability to decide who they want their leaders to be. So elections, if you may, is a marketplace of ideas. The people will support which one of the leaders that their rhetorics, commensurate with them or, manages with them.
Okay, well, that's very good. Since you brought about former President Doe, I want to get into that really quick. Keeping in context with Dr. Sawyer, who were also a president of Liberia. Would you say Doe, former President Doe, and Kuyofa and the rest of the guys from the coup were progressive? Would you say so?
President Doe?
Yes.
How you strap Doe to be a progressive? Doe have never identified. No.
I'm asking you now. Would you say?
Doe have we gotta pull out. Sergeant Doe. He was never a member. He never aligned or identified with no organization of the progressive movement in our country.
Okay. So were there members within that coup at that time that were?
Kuyofa was never a progressive. It was the military who took power in 1980. None of them were affiliating with the progressive movement. But yet, when they took power, they appointed leaders of the progressive struggle in their cabinet. They did that.
So the progressive had the opportunity to lead the country.
No, not to lead the country, but to serve.
The progressive had the opportunity
not to lead. The Liberian people have never elected. I'm not talking about interim rule. They have never elected a progressive leader and entrusted him with power. Sergeant Doe was never a member of the progressive class. He was a military man. He came from the barracks. He and General Thomas Kuyongba. Okay. The likes of J. Nicholas Portia and the rest of them.
Great. Given you are clarifying here today that they were never part of the progressive. Would you say when the progressive had the opportunity to lead the country?
I'm telling you, they never led the country, Steve.
Hold on now.
To serve. Let's use that. To serve, not to lead.
No. I will use the words. Listen now. and I'm using the word carefully, and you are trying to make me not use that word. Go ahead. I will use it because I know I'm using this word, lead as opposed to serve.
Right.
When the progressive had the opportunity to lead the country through the interim government, what would you say the record was, especially on Dr. Sawyer?
Well, you see, Dr. Sawyer's interim arrangement, and I want to say publicly on record, no leader or no member of the progressive class have been accused for rampant corruption or abuse of the public trust. Whether it was Tipote, Fambulet, Matthews, none of them were accused of rampant corruption. In fact, these were the only young men who entered government and will remit the balance of the money to the Liberian government account. Never. No record whatsoever. All the time you hear corruption. If these people have anything on old man Tipote, as old as years, they will take him to the tribunal or to prosecute him. Or on Dr. Fambulet, yes, they will bring it. But no leader of the progressive have been involved in corruption. No leader. Steve, check the files. Even you can open the line. No leader of the progressive movement have been accused of corruption anywhere. They were honest people. They're still around.
Okay, let's zoom in on Dr. Sawyer. Peace be to his ashes. Let's zoom in on his leadership as interim president of the country. Let's zoom in on that. Let's also zoom in on his role played in writing of the Constitution, the 1986 Constitution. Let's zoom in on that. Let's zoom in on that. He's a progressive. He was a progressive.
He is still.
Okay, so being a progressive, you've claimed here that there is no record of them. Then the question becomes, did the progressive protect those who carry on corruption? Did they protect them?
How can they,
And let me give you context of that.
I'm coming.
Let me give you context of that, Mr. Collins.
The 1986 Constitution,
Yes.
if you may, was a brainchild of the Brunels Commission. After President Talbot was overthrown and they had leaders in prison and they wanted a constitutional reform. So they decided to involve everybody. You had the legs of Henry Bremer Formula Sr. on the commission, Dr. Sawyer. So these were people who came on the Constitution Review Committee to review some things that were in the previous Constitution that wasn't right. I mean, constitutional review is not so unique. So when the review Constitution, was Dr. Sawyer at any point Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? Did Dr. Sawyer have any prosecutorial powers to do anything? No, he never had any of that.
So here's the irony. Here's the irony, Mr. Collins. Here's the irony, because we need to dive into this. You can't have it both ways. It's either the progressive was standing for something or the aided and abetted something. You can't have it both ways, either or. So Dr. Sawyer had all right to resign from that committee or the people who were constituted to rewrite this constitution. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of what Dr. Sawyer and some other progressive members signed up to in the constitution. Let me give you an example. Let me read this to the Liberian people so they can listen to this. After everything Doden had done, after everything they did, look at Article 97. Look at what they wrote. Look at what Dr. Sawyer then wrote. As a progressive, listen to this, Mr. Collins.
97?
A. No executive, legislative, judicial, or administrative action taken by the People's Redemption Council or by any person, whether military or civilian, in the name of that council pursuant to any of its decrees shall be questioned in any proceeding whatsoever. Accordingly, it shall not be lawful for any court or other tribunal to make any other grant, any remedy, or relief in respect of any such act. In other words, they are saying everything that Doden did, they should never be held accountable for it. What do you say to that?
Well, I cannot specifically speak to, I was never a member of the committee. I cannot tell you the framers of the Constitution at the time, what their intentions were. But I know that constitutions anywhere in the world, when they come out, they are subject to review and referendum. Hello? So the Liberian people will vote on constitutional clauses to decide that they want in their constitution. So if at the time it was the collective effort of the Liberian people to ensure that the military regime could be exempt from any judicial query, that was up to the Liberian people, because these were documents that came for referendum. They weren't just inserted there. They weren't just inserted there, Steve. So you want to undo the will and decision of the Liberian people?
No, I beg to differ because here's a question. Let's keep this in context, Mr. Collins. Let's keep this in context.
Please.
Again, Dr. Sawyer, who is a progressive,
Mhm.
an educated man, seeing this in there.
Why you single out? Listen, now, I'm coming now. Steve, no, I'm coming.
I'm asking you questions. Listen, I'm asking you questions. Just listen. Slow down. I'm asking you the question. I'm asking you the question. Just listen to the question. Dr. Sawyer, who is a progressive, and I'm singling him out because he is a progressive. According to you, he still is up until today. Why didn't he resign knowing this if the progressive stood for something better than what Doden did? Why didn't he resign from this particular? He was not forced there. He was not forced there. He was a progressive. So he was the face at that time. Let's say no other, let's just give it the benefit of the doubt that there were no other progressive. He was selected as a member from the progressive to come and make the case for the progressive. If he came on such table and this was brought to him, whether it was going for referendum or not, seeing that as an educated man, seeing that particular clause, and based on the agenda of the progressive, don't you think it would have been wise to save the image of the progressive to resign from that?
Steve, constitution are legal binding. In fact, they are the uttermost primary source of law of the republic. When constitutions are drafted, you got to understand the framers of the constitution at the time. What were they thinking? Gloria Musu-Scat, for example, I think she was one of the members of the committee. I stand to be corrected. Possibly, could it possibly be that the framers of the Liberian Constitution in 1986, they were pushing for reconciliation? Possibly. Possibly. That we must move this country forward. Possibly. So I cannot delve into the intent of the framers of the Constitution. That is a question for I think we have some members of the commission. It's a very valid question. But again, like I said, when constitutions do come out, they are subjected to referendum by the people. And you cannot undo the people's choice or what they want at the time for what somebody personally feel. Again, are there options that Dr. Sawyer could have stepped aside from the committee? It is still possible. But the context in which they operated at the time, you must understand, Steve, it is easier for us now to make analysis. Mind you now, Sergeant Doe is a military leader. They submitted people for constitutional review. And you I'm coming. You are not dealing with a surveillant president. You are dealing with a master sergeant, with all respect to Sergeant Doe, semi-illiterate. These are men who came from the barrier and say, review our constitution, and you want to be critical and asking questions about, so they should incite in the constitution, Sergeant Doe will be open for prosecution. If they could add that clause, do you know what political ramification possibly that could have been? Will the legislature even pass on that? So there are multiple factors, Steve. So sometimes when you work in group with people, it is not about what you want. It is the collective view and aspiration of what the group want. Again, it is still okay for people to give their discerns. We don't know what Dr. Sawyer personally might have said about that particular clause. Every opinion, every judicial opinion, legally, whatever, justices on Supreme Court have given discernments. They are obliged. The famous one, the Elections Commission versus, the National Elections Commission versus Liberty Party. Justice Kabina Janet gave a dissenting opinion. Does that mean that he's excluded from the decision of the Supreme Court at the time? No. It was a unanimous decision of the Supreme Court at the time. But his dissents, they are still there for people to read. Maybe it is more contemporary time that we are talking about it. Personally, if you could have asked Dr. Sawyer, do you know what he said? You don't know. So I want us to avoid making assumptions here. Mind you, these are military leaders who have just taken over and they have just put some men to the firing squad. And you come here, you want to be critical and say, okay, we'll open this thing and ask Sergeant Doe that he can be prosecuted. Understand the context in which men like that country.
Mr. Collins, this question is simple, and I think you're looking into it too deep. I'm not saying.
No, I'm just acknowledging that people can
say the contrary. Here's a simple question. Again, I'll go back to this question because this question is critical for the image of the progressive. Now, here is one of the prominent members of the progressive, who's now quote unquote illiterate, educated, is brought to the table. Mind you, the progressive just fought for this same liberty. They just fought turbo, or they just did all they could. Though then come to power, though comes to power and does all kind of funny shenanigans. Amos Sawyer is brought to the table where he had an option. Whether he spoke, I agree with you, whether he spoke against it or not, we have no record of it. But at most, for what the progressive stands for, based on what you said here today, could he have resigned from this particular body, especially with that particular clause 97? Because this was typically saying, screw you, everything that these guys did, they will never be held accountable for it. They should never be held accountable for it.
Steve, I think it was 2011. The Sirleaf administration constituted a constitution review committee. And the legislature, the people's representative, voted on clauses in the Liberian constitution that they wanted a constitutional review of. Steve, what is stopping us from enacting a debate to review that? The struggle continues. The progressives, they were not Puritans. No. And I listening to you, yeah, I think you've been historically inaccurate. You saw the exiting of huge member of the progressive community from the Sergeant Doe's administration. Sawyer resigned, Tipote resigned, Dr. Famula resigned and chased into exile. A lot of the progressive leaders resigned from Sergeant Doe's administration because they started to disagree with Sergeant Doe and started to advise Sergeant Doe, say, hey, now that you have taken power, it is imperative that if you want to perpetuate your stay in power, return the country to civilian rule. Respect the democratic tenets. So it's not like we are crushing on the very same thing we fought against. So the struggle did not end because the progressive were appointed by Mr. Doe in his government. They exited the government. They left the country. They were chased into exile. Dr. Famula was disrespected in front of the University of Liberia campus, beaten by armed men of the Doe regime, resigned as Minister of Foreign Affairs. So yes. So again, they were on record for resigning. How many young people today in our dispensation have the moral rectitude to do some of these things that these men confronted? And you are holding them to a different pedestal. Again, in our own generation.
Again, Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Before we move forward, I want to go back because there is nowhere here I stated that maybe some of the progressive members did not resign. I'm saying on the record, this is what one of the progressives signed up for and signed up to. That is my point of contention here. He signed up to this. And listen now, please listen. This contradicts even his resignation. It contradicts his resignation because in essence, what he is saying, he's aiding and abetting and covering up for the crimes, the corruption, the atrocity, the mayhems committed by Doe and other people.
When the Mallet,
hold on, listen.
No, Steve, let's do this in parts.
Listen to me, please. Listen, you are my guest here. I will hate to say I will mute you while I'm speaking. It will not be looking fine. Let's talk one at a time. We're not singing here, we're talking.
Okay.
So again, I'll go back to what I said. Whether Dr. Sawyer resigned or not, this contradicts his resignation, considering he signed up to this legal document, he signed on it as a signatory. He had option as member of the progressive, based on what he resigned from earlier on or so forth, to say, listen, I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to sign off on this. He had option. It would have been his right. He was not forced there. I don't think any member that was selected was forced there. So the question is now, does this contradict Dr. Sawyer's or the progressive for what it stood for?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Steve, when you work together with a group of people, you must try to avoid imposing your personal view, even when you write across the room on the rest of the people. But it is still okay for you to say, hey, I choose to leave. It is still very much okay. As I said to you, when the military took over, aside from the execution of the 13 men on firing squad and incorporating people to say, hey, let us review the Constitution. Sergeant Doe was not stealing money and building houses here, there, yonder. So when Sergeant Doe started to do some of these things, it raises an alarm to say, hey, this is not what we signed up to. So again, as I said, I personally cannot answer those questions for Dr. Sawyer. I think it's important for us not to dwell on this, Sawyer's participation with the Constitution Review Committee. But again, the struggle does not end with Sawyer's participation. He's not a Puritan or the most righteous human being that existed. It is you and our obligation to enact a new conversation to say, hey, so why you want to go get the PRC people? Many of them, they are nowhere around. They're dead. You'll go bring Sergeant Doe from his grave? Oh, yeah, we can decide to make it open. But I'm saying to you that when you're part of organizational structures, it is okay for you to disagree, but not to only impose your personal decision on your friends. I've been part of groups where I've disagreed, and my friends say, oh, this guy is very critical. It's okay. But you will go on the record, and it's very unprofessional when you're working on constitutional documents, especially in the formative stages, and you say, no, you're resigning here and there. It impedes the progress of the committee.
Did you say it was unconstitutional? Is that what
I'm saying when you're working on constitutional documents, you want to be careful how you conduct yourself and how you work with the group, because you resigning possibly could impede the work of the committee. Maybe constitutionally, the committee could have met a certain threshold. It is still okay for you to give your dissents, like in the case of Justice Janet.
So let me get this clear for.
Don't imply that Sawyer didn't disagree.
So
there. You weren't there either.
So let me get this clear so we can move forward to the next question. Because I think I'm a little confused and dumbfounded by what you just said. It is okay for you to disagree and resign for any group if it contravenes with what you stand for, if it contravenes with what will benefit the people. Most importantly, it is okay for you to resign. You saying that, I want to clear that part up, because that statement is a little confusing. I don't know where that's coming from, but it's okay for you to resign. It's okay for you to disagree openly. It's okay for you to walk away from any deal or anything you are called to. You are not legal, especially if it, and that's where my question came from in terms of Moja. Moja stood for something different as opposed to what Doe then brought or what it did. Now, I'm agreeing with you also that Dr. Sawyer could have disagreed. Maybe there is no record of it. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just going off what he signed off on the record. That's all I'm saying. But we can move on to the next question, if you don't mind.
But Steve, just before we move on, I listened to you very carefully. So whose interest does it benefit to say, okay, we'll prosecute the PRC people? For what? For overthrowing the Toba regime? So it was a struggle of class. You got to understand, yeah. It will be undermining the very same progressive struggle. What did the PRC government do? It was a military takeover. When army take over all around the world, they don't give her ice cream and roses and pop champagnes. It's so the nature of the struggle. Here's the roll. It is just now in Guinea that you see, and Mohamed Doumbouya can take over and be eating fried rice and chicken on live camera and tell his uncle to resign. And a lot of optics have been saying it was a staged military overthrow. So it is not a Sunday school party, Steve, if you may. So you think Sergeant Doe will sign up to a document that indicts the very same government to plunge the country back into chaos? Okay, let's assume for the sake of argument. So I say, okay, we'll put in this constitution that everything the PRC did, they will be held accountable. Before any law is passed, it goes through the office of the president. Are you cognizant of that, my dear brother?
More than likely.
The legislature will have to take specific vote on pertinent issues. When a committee do their report, they submit it to the national legislature.
So are you saying in context?
They're not going to go and indict the city administration and say, okay, what the PRC did for killing the tech team. And also you also want us to open a Pandora box now. So we also say the touring party people should account for the 250 comrades who died April 14, 1979. Should we add that there that we can press? We can go after and prosecute, TWP people, True Party people. Can we do that?
So are you saying in essence here that
Yes.
Are you saying in essence here, even the TRC recommendation should not be pursued because we don't want to open Pandora box?
No. The TRC made a recommendation. The mandate of the TRC, Liberia met in Ghana at the Accra Peace Accord and adopted the TRC as a remedy to address some of the issues of injustices in the country. Do you know why the TRC report still lingers the way it is today? It indicted the former sitting president to say Mr. Salih should be banned from contesting public office.
But was it wrong? Hold on. Was it wrong?
It was justified.
So does it also now let's come back to the same Doe issue. Was it justifiable for Doe and the PRC regime to be held accountable? Listen, to be held accountable for what they did since they took office, especially the rampant corruption that they carried
Steve,
on?
at the time, the country was not on normality, if you may. You are still on a military rule here. You had just proposed a constitution for review. The military, yes, will have influence. In fact, when the military took over, all of the people Sergeant Doe appointed, they elevated to the rank of general in the army. All of the ministers in government, they were general in the army. It was a military takeover, Steve. I'm keep telling you, there's not a Sunday school party. So I'm not here to defend Sergeant Doe, but I'm telling you, I'm just being historically honest and the realities of these things.
So that means what you are saying in essence, because what
Mr. Salih administration was a democratic administration. You had a functional legislature. You had the opposition at the time, the CDC. They held more seats in the legislature. That's checks and balance. Steve.
So this is.
Remember, you're talking Sergeant Doye.
Hold on 1 second now. Listen. After the elections, when Doe took over, shouldn't he have been held accountable? That's why.
But the country was not on a civilian rule. That's what I'm telling you, Steve. When the military take over all over in the world, the first thing they do. I'm coming, no, Steve. Come here. I'm coming. They suspend the constitution. That's the first thing they do, as a matter of cushion. So you want to blame the progressive for the corruption of the PRC?
No. That's not what I'm saying. Let's go back.
So the horse Samuel Doe built in Tuzon. That is for soil.
No, we are saying two different things. You are saying two different things. You're trying to say two different things that are very interesting.
No, I admire the conversation.
It's very funny. But let's go back. Mm-hmm. So you are saying to me and the rest of the people that are listening to us that
right,
even after Doe quote unquote won the elections, which now brings him to legitimacy, which in essence brought in this particular constitution, because now the constitution was no longer suspended. They had to revive the constitution. Because yes, when he took over, the constitution was suspended. But after the elections, after quote unquote he won, guess what? The constitution had to come in effect. Mm-hmm. So when the constitution came in effect, this is what I'm speaking of now.
But Steve, I'm coming now, not to cut you off. The constitution was adopted in 86. It became valid in 86.
Right.
So when do you think the committee will start going to work? It was still on a military rule. Because committees are coming and the committee work in stages. The committee will do their internal review. They will have legislative hearings. They will even have citizen engagement and participation. And it goes at that level. Then it is submitted to a referendum.
No, but at this time, you're
talking years here. You're talking years and time.
No. At this time, and you're trying to drift from the initial question, which is not even about the committee. It's about an individual member of this committee and an entire group that this individual either represented or was part of the face of. So I hope you're getting my question. I hope I didn't confuse you here. I'm saying, could Sawyer had resigned from this committee, considering based on what was inserted into this, especially this Article 97, which was in total violation of maybe the group that he came onto. It was in total violation of this group. Could he have resigned to say, I don't want to be part of this committee, or, based on what's inserted in here, I'm not comfortable with. That's not what the group I ascribe to, stand for. This is what my question was in line to. It was not necessarily the entire committee.
Steve, Dr. Sawyer, as I said to you, is not a Puritan, meaning he's subject to making mistakes.
Okay,
we don't elevate the leaders of the progressive struggle to ranks of God, where they are infinite and everything they does is okay. Possibly, are there opportunities that he could have resigned? Yes. Did he disagree? You and I don't know. So we need not to start making insinuations. We don't know whether he disagree with them. So we don't know also the context in which Dr. Sawyer and other people struggle. So it's easy for one to say, flying a plane, it's easy when you're actually not in flight, when you're not in the captain's cockpit. So you don't know. So Steve, we cannot make this presumptive analysis to say, oh yeah, it was okay. Possibly, yes. When the country when Sergeant Doe went to elections, they saw the election, whether election very democratic. You saw men, guarding the prisons with arms. Those are pictures that we saw around here. Mm-hmm. Understand the context in which you are understanding. Understand to the tribal participation. This is a young man from Grand Jida who have come to power. The Grand Jidas were holding on to power. That is their man. Tuzon was active. The boys from Grand Jida believe, and that is how these political people manage to sectionalize the country, where we can use our religion, our tribe, to perpetuate our stay in power. Again, some of the people in the army, why do you see the falling apart of Kuyongpa who come from Nimba County? Why there's so much rift in the country? So the context in which the Constitution, we don't know the mandate of the Constitution Review Committee. It could have been in the spirit of national reconciliation and unity. I think I stand to be corrected. One of the signatories, Mother Mary Brunel, who have fought for peace and justice in our country, with the women movement of this country. She was probably one of the members of the committee. So we don't know the context in which they operated. So you are just laying emphasis on a fraud. I mean, Steve, you are intellectual. When we read academic papers, it is not 100%. You put that thing through Grammarly, you will feel biased by your own writing skills. So we are only subject to make errors, and it's okay for those errors to get corrected and rectified. That is why the struggle does not just end with the legs of Sawyer, Tipote, Matthews. The struggle still continues today. So if you identify something backward in the Constitution, bring it out for election. I look at the Liberian Constitution, one of the most racist in the world. Your Constitution says that only people of Negro descent can be citizens of Liberia. But you come to Europe, you are okay to go to USCIS. you take American citizenship, it's okay. But your Constitution says white people cannot be citizens in your country.
Okay, Gavin, all right. Well, let's move forward. Let's move forward about this.
These are lots of contradictions too, lots of contradictions.
No, I agree with you.
Also say when you used to come from Newtown, from where I come, if your father left you a land, you cannot own title to it. Once you take up U.S. citizenship, how many Liberians are upright and honest to say, hey, I've taken foreign citizenship, per Liberian law, I cannot own land yet or property yet. So, as we move in time and stages, it's also okay for us to put the Constitution for review. They are not law and gospel. They are not the whole gospel of Jesus Christ, or the Quran of Prophet Muhammad.
Great. Let's move forward to maybe one or two more national issues, and we'll open the line for a few minutes, and we can call it a day. So, if you are just joining us, ladies and gentlemen, this is SKTV. We're in a interview or conversation here with Mr. Darlington S. Collins from the Progressive. Where is the Progressive now, and what are some of the plans of the Progressive in terms of whether what we see in the country, what we see going on in the country today? Some of those things that the Progressive fought about seem to have not been changed. Either maybe the name might have changed or the title. I'll give you an example. Most recently, when President George Weah administration took over, the vice president would say, quote unquote, you either join us or you can get a job, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. That in itself was part of the things that the Progressive stood against. quote unquote, Dawatan, quote unquote, you've heard some seditionists saying, if you're not join us, or these different little slogans that show that you got to be sedition, or you got to be part of the ruling party, you got to fall in line with the ruling party in order to get any kind of recognition, or to do what is right, or to even have a voice, or to have a saying. You got to fall in line. They call members of people who disagree with them, who openly criticize the government, as enemies of state, enemies of the state. Where's the progressive in what's going on?
The progressives, they are still around. And you asking where are the progressive? The lawyer who is representing Princess Kopo, Brother Tiawan Gonglo, was a progressive. He comes from the LPP. Tiawan Gonglo has been protecting activists in that country for more than 12 years. Progressive is still there. Dr. Fambula, for example, he is still writing and inspiring a whole breed of generation, authoring books. So the progressive, for them, it is not necessarily to come to political power. Brother Alaric Tugba, how many times have you pop up on social media and you see Alaric Tugba going to the university campus and encouraging the students and offering lecturing services to them on a pro bono basis? So they are still around. It's just that, unfortunately, the current administration, does not recognize men who have fought for social justice in this country. They disrespect almost everybody who are quote unquote consider, they say the old people should go and sit down. Now we are the young people running the country. We are running the country down to the ground in shambles. So the progressives are still around. If you ask for help, they will come and help you. It is not about taking political power, but the arrogance in young people. We think that we are the most, technical ones now. It's our time now to clinch onto political power. So, if you don't ask for help, they are still around. The other day, you listened to Sister Miata Fambula, Enter Miata, dealing with some of the backwardness in the regime, in the system, and talking about how the social fabric of the society is broken. So, the people are still around. All you need to do is to reach out for help. The struggle was not just intended to ensure that they should be, or they must, have the executive power, or any one of them to be president. The fruit of the progressive struggle is for the Liberian people. Nobody could ever function in their mind that a we will be president of this country called Liberia. Go look at the names from 1847 up to 1980. Who are president of your country? Jenkins, Warner, Daniel B. Warner. Call the names. Call some of the names. Call some of the names. Totman, Totball. Those were people from American Liberian hegemony that power concentrated among. The ones that we have today. I did the most. I did the very better ones. No, but it's going to get better over time. Over time, new leaders will emerge. If the people elect leaders and they are corrupt, the people will vote them out. Look at the 52nd sitting of the national legislature. Most of them went out for re-election. How many of them returned to the legislature? It is just few people like Snow who managed to loot so much money that can, reinvest the resources back in political capital and get re-elected. That's still parading. But over time, the struggle can only get better. The people where we have the bad apples, even some of us, we never know. If the people give some of us an opportunity to go to the legislature, if we are corrupt, they will vote us out. There'll be new leaders will continue their struggle.
So are you insinuating or signaling that you have intents to run for political office?
Well, you see, I'm not going to answer that right now.
Why is that?
I'll tell you why. As a brother and friend, I'll pretend as if we don't have audience here. I'm interested in my personal growth and development. I believe that there's much more that I can contribute to my country, and nobody should take it away from me. I think it is only through capacity building, beyond the regular, talk. It is where we can, work in private sector, educate ourselves. Like you, I'm very proud of you. You one of the decent brother we have out here. You're doing your PhD program. Not many young people know that about you. But when I see young brother like you doing PhD, my good friend, Apleto Padmo, who got admitted to do his PhD. My good friend, you know, and Deconti. You know, these are young brothers who are doing PhD years ago. to attempt to do PhD, it means you have, you know, pot belly. But there's still bright future for Liberia.
My man, you're not answering it.
Bright minds are around.
My man, you're not answering the question. They political thing. I don't want to be inside. Are you insinuating that you intend to run for office? That's a straightforward question.
Steve, I'm a political man. You cannot take away contesting public office from me.
Okay.
In my lifetime, all I've done was contested and participated in elections, whether it was student politics or youth election. I'm a political man, and I just said to you that I don't think the time is right now, because you see, a lot of young people like myself, I think we must be very careful here. In as much as we provide alternative option for our people, we must always ask ourselves fundamental question: are we prepared? Can we go to the legislature? What do we intend to take to the legislature? The legislature is not no mechanic shop that you can go, you say you want to learn on the job. Or just because your sentence, your subject verbs agree, or you talk nicely, you look fine in suits, or you manage to lay your hand on a couple of $1,000, you want to go to the legislature. People must go to the national theater with their different, you know, stratification of discipline. Somebody should be coming in the era of oil and gas. Somebody should be coming, you know, with the era of rule of law. Somebody should be coming with public policy, information technology. How can we ensure that we have fiber optic running? My good friend, you know, Hamilton Green is one of those decent brothers who's doing well in IT. So we must go to the legislature with some form of professional background. How do you think the U.S. Congress is one of the most powerful Congress in the world? Because they align people with particular committees, given their expertise. Mama, you're going to hear the Senate Committee on Judiciary. You're very decent. You come from Harvard University, Cornell Law. You head in that department. You are very good with public policy. You went to Johns Hopkins, for example, in public health. You lead the Senate Committee on Healthcare. So when these policymakers come to the legislature, you scrutinize them. But it's so disheartening when you see some of the clowns we have in the legislature. Some of them they don't sound knowledgeable because they didn't come to the legislature with any professional background. For them, it was about offering themselves, but the politics can only get better. So I mean, for now, I don't intend to contest for public office. I can say that on the record. Contemporarily, I mean, that is for 2023. 2023 may excuse my participation on a ballot box.
Okay. Well, SKTV will be here whenever you are ready to contest, so that we can ask you the needed question. You know, aside
you're very engaging. You're very engaging, and I think
aside from the progressive, we're asking. You know, we scrutinize Darlington S. Collins as Darlington S. Collins. We can bring in the progressive later, but
you cannot divulge my ideological leaning, because everything that I know that I'm inspired to do is off the backs of the progressive struggle. Men like Professor Alaric Togba, Christopher Dubayan, these are bigger brothers who have inspired a new generation of Liberian leaders. So, you know, we are striving to them. So, yes, it's okay for us to talk, you know, personally. And that is why people find it difficult. Let me say this before you go to the line. I'm not a member of any of these political parties. I aligned with the LPP and the NDC. I have not signed up to any membership because when I decide to get active in party politics, I leave from the front. I have never been in any political organization where I've been a backbencher. No, backbenchers do not have space in this new generation of Liberia we want to build. So all of us must get involved, you know. So yes, we'll always find time.
Okay, wonderful, 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 and wonderful. Well, Mr. Collins, let's bring you to the most recent realities of things going on in the country really quick. Take one or two questions from there, and then we'll open the lines here really, really quick. We are still in time here. So, what do you make of the opening of the Invincible Park and vis-a-vis the rights issue that's still seem to be, I don't know, hovering and so forth, because as of last night, I've gotten some calls and some reports that, rice price is up. And the electricity, most recently, the electricity issue at the airport and even the country at large. I've heard from some people also that because of the rain, the electricity issues seem to be getting adjusted to some extent. What do you say?
You see, I pity the psyche of our society, where bad leaders will come to power and line their pockets, amass private properties for themselves, leaving the people in wretchedness and poverty. And in a few years or election, they will come to do something presumably decent and want to make the loudest of noise. Where was Mr. Weah? His vision for an invisible park when he took over in less than 8 months? We saw the lining of fleet of homes for Mr. George Weah. I want to join the CDC too. I have said if Mr. George Weah can turn his 60-something housing unit to the Ministry of Health for maternal newborn care centers for our mothers to give birth, I will join the CDC tomorrow. You build a very tight space and not so decent for the kids to play, and you want us to clap for you. Weah is not using his own resources. It is the nation's resources. Yes, you see, if you want to compare the level of progress, he diverts public funds to private use. See the level of homes they are owning. Natano McGill living in a house costs $250,000. My own big brother Samurai Wolokoli, he's the most public official with the most colorful houses all over the country. When you turn to Banjo, the Samurai Wolokoli get it one. You turn Duboro or the Samurai get it one. All of them. The mindset of public office is not a place to come to serve with dignity and honor for the people. It's to steal. All of your criticism here, and Steve, Dr. Sawyer was former interim president. Dr. Formula, former Minister of Education, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Barcott Matthew, former Foreign Affairs Minister. Where do you know colorful houses for them are? Bunch of indecent young people. We come to power, all we want to do is to build houses for ourselves at the expense of the people. And no, I don't acknowledge that. We don't have my validation. I'm not interested. He can build 10 investable parks throughout the country. He don't have my attention. He don't count. It's unfortunate that we have to respect the office of the president of the country. I respect the office, but the occupant in our office, I owe no such respect to him. I don't think he respects the people.
Okay. Well,
I owe no such respect to him.
Well, let me ask you this last question on the opposition. The opposition seem to be in different courts at different times, and sometimes simultaneously.
Right.
Given today, Mr. Alexander P. Cummings was in court, and then the UP / ALP / CPP were also in court. What do you make of this? What do you make? What would the progressive say? What would the progressive do with this? Because the progressive were the same ones that signed up for this multi-democracy or parties or so forth. They want everybody to be partakers and everybody to have. What would you say?
Well, it is good that you have identified the progressive struggle success story, multi-party democracy. It is a good thing. But you see, Steve, let me say this to you, my brother. When everybody, was trying to presidential wannabes, everybody want to be president, all right? And a friend of mine said, where do you stand? Cummings is organizing and Boyka is organizing and Ure on the flip side is organizing. I said to them, from fundamental understanding of political science, political people have power-seeking behavior. If you take Steve Bollitt, for example, and Darlington Collins to work uniform, in line or to align politically, let me put it that way, there will be divergence of opinion. So I think it's okay for Mr. Alexander Cummings to strengthen his base, to mobilize his people. It is also okay for United Party to mobilize and strengthen her base and mobilize her people. It is okay, even in the then CPP. I've been told by the United Party that they are no more in the marriage. even in the then CPP, it was still okay for everybody to strengthen their base. But what we must warn against in the opposition here is that the regime to try to use forces, new or unknown, people who are state criminals and internationally indicted for public crimes of corruption, to use these people to disfigure or to indict or to compel the opposition to go to court, and they will use the kangaroo judiciary system to present certain people from contesting elections. We must warn against that. I think it's okay if Mr. Cummings believes that he has the support of the masses of the people, he can put that to elections. Do I support Mr. Alexander Cummings? No, I don't. 2023 is right here. Vice President Joseph Boakai too, he's also wanting to be president. Elections, if you may, they are not won in 1 or 2 days to election, Steve. The people will always go for who they are more familiar with, who can possibly rally the numbers. I mean, I am not still convinced in some of the things Mr. Boakai is doing, but is he rallying the masses all over the country? Look at the electoral statistics from 2017. If he could come second, even though there were allegations that the elections were rigged, I think he is still a better alternative to the Liberian people. Again, people say, oh, he's old, he can go and sit down and the old man sleeps here and there. He's old. Okay. We have a 54-year-old, I'm a 54, 55, or 56 president who is very awake. Unfortunately, he don't find time in reading. So somewhere to where they are always presenting mop-up documents. So President Weah is not interested in reading. For he himself is interested in how much money he can get for himself. No level of public service scrutiny. So, I mean, again, Vice President Boakai is a democratic political space. I think all of them must be given an opportunity to make their case. And let me say this before you go to the line. It is a propaganda from the ruling establishment to say to the Liberian people, if the opposition cannot work together, you just vote for George Weah. No. Politics is a marketplace of ideas. If you go to the mall, there's Macy's, there's H&M, there are multiples of different departmental stores. It is your ability where you want to purchase, based on your purchasing power, your taste, or the whatever you feel like wearing or you want to buy. You go to the store and you buy and you wear it. So I'm also saying the Liberian people must be given a political showroom where they should decide who their leaders will be. Forget the propaganda and the politics of it. So if the Liberian people, if they are okay with backwardness and rampant corruption, if they want to ensure that Una Mesa Weah should be okay, and the mothers are giving, breath simply by nature, there should be, unexplained killings, that the city mayor should continue to remain law unto himself, that wherever he goes, everybody, run here and there. The only difference between the city mayor of Monrovia and Chucky Taylor is that maybe Mayor Koji is not open carrying firearm. All of these things we see here, these are things that are happening. We speak, we say this, we remind our people about the contradictions in the society. It is the people's responsibility to decide who they want their leaders to be. If they decide to re-elect Mr. George Weah, we come from Granku, he's my kinsman. It's okay. The war will not burn down because George Weah is president. He will just steal more. There will be more rampant corruption. There will be abuse of public trust. The masses will be waving 6 more years of their life to destitution and poverty. I mean, personally, from a more personal standpoint, will my family still afford a cup of rice to eat? Yes, they will. Will I still have clothes to put on my back? I still will. So it is not for ourselves.
Okay.
It is for the betterment and the improvement of the society. So Mr. Boakai, I think, is doing very well. I think Mr. Cummings, too, should be given an opportunity to market his ideas. If the Liberian people believe in his rhetoric, if they make him president, that's fine. Somebody said the politics is not static. The numbers game can change. Boakai could be doing well in 2017. In 2023, it could be Mr. and Mr. Cummings. It's possible, but I mean, from political stacks, the numbers just don't easily fluctuate. The numbers move, on the number line, and it goes up. It comes from down. It always comes in a sense upward in stages.
Okay, thank you. Always comes and extends upwards in stages. Those were the words of Mr. Darlington S. Collins. Let's get to the lines really quick. You can place your call here for the next 5 minutes. We'll take few calls, and we should be able to call it a day for the next 5 minutes. Mr. Collins, it's good seeing you. The last time I know we hung out was in February at the funeral.
Yeah. Very sad. The passing of
Yeah.
our good friend.
Yes. I know most people don't know, but as a disclaimer, we always have good conversations, and we push, challenge, encourage, and talk about a lot of different things beyond closed doors. So Mr. Collins is not a stranger. He's a brother, a friend, an ally, or confidant.
But man, the way you dealt me on the show, that
My man will discuss that one after the show.
it's good. It's these engagements, one who aspires to leadership must never shy away from taking your questions, no matter how difficult it is. No matter how difficult it is.
Hello.
How are you?
Yes. You said, what's your name again, please?
Mohammed Keita from Staten Island, New York.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, Mohammed. We're listening. What's your input here today?
Okay, my input here is you guys are discussing progressive issues, right, in Liberia.
Most definitely.
And and I listened, and I think I was very impressed by the eloquence there of your guest. But I have a very specific question. Justice Cabinet Jalez was dismissed or terminated. He's a progressive. I want to know what his view on that issue. Was it legally acceptable by the Liberian people, by progressive, and also by the lawmakers? What is your opinion on that, please?
Okay, thank you so much. And he'll respond subsequent time. Thank you. Okay, as we're with another call here, Mr. Collins, maybe you can address that at your closing. But you are saying something. You are in flight saying something.
We regardless of I was talking about our good friend Christmas Saley, peace be to his ashes. Regardless of our divergence on how we see our differences on how we see politics, we must always embrace the friendship, with our brothers. As you know, Christmas and I politically we never agreed, but he was a brother. Anytime I recount on moments with him, it's always very tearful. Losing a young brother with so much ideas in his head. Very much love his country and want to see positive change. A lot of people, no matter that he was in the CDC, he's my brother first. Before he became a member of the CDC, and I think that leaders must subject themselves to public scrutiny and by taking your questions, and that is how the society will get better. Through these kinds of engagement. So,
Yes, my man. As always, we're here. You know what we do. But you want to address that question, so maybe we can call it a day here because
you see, the reason why our country degenerated into civil upheaval was because the country ostracized a certain group of people from the politics, whether it was the indigenous people who the settlers met on the land, whether it was people from the Western Cluster region, predominantly the Mandingo people or people, believe from different religious groups. These were some of the reasons why, the compelling reasons why you see the multiplicity of warring factions in our country. And we were the first to condemn the removal of Justice Cabinet Janet from the Supreme Court bench. Justice Janet was removed simply because he gave a dissenting opinion against the popular view of his colleagues on the Supreme Court, headed by Chief Justice Francis Kokpo. The elements of the CDC weren't happy with that. They used, Representative Gray, who parades himself as a public national icon and hero. We saw the exiting of Justice Janet. But Justice Janet didn't just leave the Supreme Court. He embarrassed the Liberian legislature at the ECOWAS
I think I have another caller here. Hold on, please. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from, please?
Hi, my name is Hamilton Green, and I call from Minnesota.
Hey, Hamilton, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to appreciate Brother Darlington Collins, and I must admit that I was amused by his grasp of history. You know, I am also a student of the progressive class of our country. I believe that today we enjoy multi-party democracy because of the struggle that they carry out. And I believe that that is a struggle that we must continue for the betterment of our society. I just wanted to mention something quickly, you know. What struck me very well was when you asked Brother Collins, where are the progressives today? And I was like, but, I mean, why would the moderator be asking these kinds of questions when he has a progressive sitting right beside him? Because, you know, we have a different perspective of what the progressives are. You know, the progressive is not soil. The progressives, no, it's not formula. It's not typical. There will always be progressives. That is the reason why there are always stages of the struggle, like Frank Fanon will say, right? I mean, every generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. We cannot depend on soil. I mean, peace be to his ashes, on formula and people to come in and struggle for us today. We must decide what are the important things for our country. We all know that our country is backward. We all know that our country, needs economic emancipation. That is the reason why we are happy when we see young people like Brother Darlington Collins around. That is the reason why we are happy when we see young militants from the Students' Unification Party around. So I just wanted to say to you, my brother, the progressives will always be around. I mean, I am a progressive. I know Brother Collins is a progressive. There are a lot of progressive young men. There are a lot of progressive young people in our country who are interested in the betterment and forward of our country.
So, Mr. Green, thank you so much. But can I ask you a question before you leave, please?
Yes, most definitely.
So would you say I'm a progressive as well?
I mean, it is possible that you will be a progressive. It depends on how positive thinking you are. I mean, I don't know you individually. Oh, I mean, definitely not. But it's also possible you can be a progressive as long as you are thinking positively towards the positive image of the country, as long as you have a definite and defined goal of what you decide to struggle for your country. The progressive is not tied to an individual. No, it can never be. It is an entire struggle that must continue even after we have left.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your input, Mr. Green.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
Have a good week. Bye. All right, Mr. Collins, you can end up and maybe give us your parting comment.
So, no, just before my parting comments. So, the removal of Justice Janet was unconstitutional and embarrassing. And it was just so wrong. I followed the case very well. I listened to one of the expert witnesses in the case that was informing the legislature, perspective as an expert witness. The Leonard professor at law, Justice, what is this old man? Very Leonard professor at the university. He used to be on the Supreme Court bench. That professor explained to the lawmakers on case law on how Justice Janet conducted himself. Look at it. Look at the lies the guys concocted against Justice Janet. He sold land in 1993. He took somebody's land, and how is that considered using his office to acquire somebody's land? So it was all a political witch hunt, and I think the guys removing Justice Kabina Janet was very wrong, and it is just so plain wrong. I think Justice Janet should be reinstated. If we have a more functional government, yes, and thank you, big brother, brother Bima, for reminding me. Justice Philip Isaac Banks, very learned professor at the university. The old man took his time. It's like the lawmakers, they were just waiting to vote from the morning that Judge Weah sent it. If they could have said to Justice Banks that we already been paid to pass a verdict on Justice Kabina Janet, then they couldn't have wasted the legislative court time. Justice Banks could not have come, did legal research, and come and inform, lawmaker perspective about how they should conduct themselves. So I think Brother Hamilton Green struck a very good point. I mean, Frank Fanon of the French Revolution, In the Wretches of the Earth. That's a book. You probably need to read that, my dear brother. Other security. Every generation has a mission, fulfill it or betray it. We can now talk about Sawyer, Fambule, Tipote, Matthews. This is our own generational struggle. What are we doing? What are we doing? Are we contributing? Are we engaging? Are we holding our public officials to account? I think these are fundamental questions that we must ask ourselves. We cannot, go for these, respectable old men to continue to struggle for us. By the way, many of them were in their early 20s when they joined political agitation. Thank you, Steve, for giving me the opportunity to come on your show. I really do appreciate it. I think it was very interactive. I learned a lot from the audience. I'm also here reading the comments. I think it's very engaging, and you as well. You help me to account. Fact checking was great. We don't always have to agree, but I think what you're doing here is very positive. You mean well for your country, and I can say you too. You are a progressive. The fact that you came to this country, you want to move. You're doing your PhD now. That's progress. So moving from one stage of backwardness to a state of progress, and that's what you're doing. So we're proud of that, and I appreciate your audience. I'll always be willing to come on your platform, just beyond this day to, just chit chat. And we can talk the regular politics, but politics is a marketplace of ideas. The Liberian people must have the time to render judgment on who they want their next president to be. It's fair enough, it's up to them. When we take a side, yes, we are progressive leaders. We wait for our leaders to talk. Maybe Dr. Formula will tell us in 2023 where we will go, who will enjoy our support, and that is where we will take our stand.
Well, it's always an honor and a pleasure interacting with you, not only as a brother, as a friend, as an ally, and most definitely so. We know your phone lines are open to us, so we're definitely going to be reaching out so that we can get your insight on some national issues, not necessarily restricted to the progressive or so forth, but other issues in the country and around the country as well, and that concerns Liberian. And I know for sure I'm holding you to this, and I'm making it a public service announcement that Mr. Darlington Collins will be here by fire by force. And if he try, I know where he is. I will go get him from there.
I would try, my dear brother. I'm a very busy man. I'm very busy. Behind the camera, I'm very busy, man.
Right.
I my schedule. You know how things get in America. But again, I'll find time to come here to engage with our people, to learn, to share ideas. It's a learning opportunity for all of us. I think when you aspire to be leaders of men, you must subject yourself to engaging and answering the question of the people, and don't just be an extension. I always follow your show. I listen, to your in other news. I think it's very important. And you see how sometimes some of your audience get uncomfortable when you try to critique their side, and they must understand that there's a democratic political space. And that is how we elevate our leaders to rank of a god. That just because I support Joseph Boyka that he's exempt from public scrutiny. Who told you so? If Boyka wants to be exempt from public scrutiny, he can go and be the town chief in Foya. If he wants to be president of our country, it's our opportunity to engage him and cross-examining and asking the hard question. You want to be president. How do you want to do it? If Mr. Cummings wants to be president of our country, there's not Coca-Cola. He's not the only top executive here where he come with PowerPoint presentation and tell us where he wants to carry Coca-Cola. He must tell us where he wants this country called Liberia. It must be engaging. So I think we should not put our leaders to a point where they're exempt from public scrutiny. How did George Weah become president of your country? He never attended any single public debates. You never listened to his ideas. He never promised you anything. But now you expect him to wave a magic wand.
Yeah.
What a people we are.
Well, we'll make the announcements while you're here with us, because you and I will leave together. We're continuing the conversation behind closed doors. But since you brought up about other news, let me give you other news quick before we. I know that the way you let
My man,
you let know us. You reminded me of other news. Let me get it for other news. In other news. Yeah. In other news, there's about to be a serious loss in United Party. In other news.
In other news.
Mark this today. Go mark it down on your calendar. Serious noise. In other news, the big boys. I know Mr. Collins alluded to the big boys stealing and building mansions. Let me tell the big boys something. In other news, when you have a sanction.
Mm-hmm.
In other news, right after the human rights report that was brought up, they have finally put a nail on the coffin
Okay.
And that's it. It is done. It is up.
I think it is long overdue. The Americans need to bring sanctions quickly.
You enjoy the celebration of the Invincible Pack, because maybe that might be probably the last enjoyment you're having. So you enjoy it as much as you can. Very soon, very soon, not too long from now, in the next few days, the noise are coming in CDC. There are small noise in other news, but in other news also. In other news, you and Lofa Julius, I will find you guys. My man, Leo, man. My man, wait, my man, don't. We're supposed to be having a reunion, me, you, and Lofa Julius, but I don't know where we'll go with Georgia or where.
I mean, you know, we playing. You called me one time. You said,
my man,
you
don't
Christmas.
My man, don't talk that thing. Don't.
Yeah, my man, this life, man.
It's not balanced. But let me get the last part of the other news here. In other news.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can say it.
You just got a text.
It's just for my mom. More likely so in other news. Aaron Costa.
What happened to him again?
In the United Party, as part of the North.
Let me leave my brother, man. You leave my brother. You're all on news. No, you see, let me tell you something. You see, the Unity Party folks must be receptive to Mr. Aaron Costa's criticism of them. And those criticisms, they are very meaningful. Because when he weren't with them, they have some of the worst and despicable things to say about him. It is also their business to say if they don't want Mr. Costa to support their man, Joe Boyka. Joe Boyka enjoys the support of Mr. Henry Costa, and there's nothing that can change that. So, I mean, if elements of the Unity Party, they are not happy, they can go and sort that out in party executive committee. I don't know how they can query their standard bearer, but no. I know Costa and the vice president, Joe Boyka, have enjoyed a harmonious relationship, and there's nothing, that can come between that. I think the old man is very focused to go to election in 2023. So they should stay on top of that. I think it's very important.
Thank you. Well, tomorrow there is no mental health and wellness as we've announced to you before. So next Friday we'll resume. Saturday we're poised to be on. Sunday we'll be on as well. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Collins. We'll talk beyond closed door. Thank you for your time. Thanks to you. Thanks to the progressive. Thanks to Liberians all around the world. Thanks for sticking with us and staying with us. Thank God one of my friends finally came by, Darlington Collins. So guess what? We'll play Find a Friend Like Me. We're going to look for our other friend, look for Julius.
Love. Find a friend like me. Find a friend like me. If you not want betrayal, find a friend like me. Find a friend like me. Find a friend like me. If you not want betrayal, find a friend like me.
Bombe oh, find a friend like me. Bombe jene oh, find a friend like me. Find a friend like me. Find a friend like me.
Hey, see bestie, your bestie not